Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
We have Keith Wood and Stephen Ferris on the line. Evening, gents, you're both there.
Good evening, how are you, Joe? Are you well?
Good evening, Joe.
Very well, very well. So the good news first off is that Tyke Furlong reckons he's going to be just fine for the Welsh match, Keith.
I'd say he wouldn't even know what a hamstring is, for God's sake. I don't even know if they exist fully in the species of the front row. Never hurt one myself, I have to say. But
he runs pretty fast for a big man.
In fairness to him, he is a big man and he does run fast. Look, I thought it was pretty sensible. He went off very early. He had a twinge. Where's the risk in terms of a game against Italy? And I think the right call was made, so hopefully he'll be absolutely fine.
Yeah, he seems to say he will be. Robbie Henshaw, though, Stephen, is most definitely out, and so already people are playing around with the various possibilities for what we do in the centre partnership.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of options that Joe can choose from. However, I think Chris Farrell, even though he hasn't been in the match day 23, he's been training with the squad. He's been on the pitch in the warm-ups in the lead up to the French game and the Italian game. So I think he's the man that knows all the calls inside out. You know, if there was an injury in any of those warm-ups, that he would be the next man in. So I think Chris Farrell might get the nod. He's a big man. He's very, very fit. This game that the Welsh are going to play, they're going to run the Irish off their feet, etc. We've heard it all before. If there's one man that you'd have in there, yes, he's a big unit, but he's a very, very fit guy. And I think him and Bundiaki in the centre would trouble any backline in World Rugby. So it's going to be very interesting to see, especially with Ringrose apparently getting a little bit of game time this week.
Oh, is he? Because we were confused. So they have the Scarlets this weekend. Have you breached confidence? Have you heard this behind the scenes, or have you read this somewhere?
No, just seeing pictures of him in training with the guys. So I think Joe might have publicly come out and said that he's going to get game time over the next couple of weeks with Leinster. So I'm just kind of assuming that he's possibly going to be in that squad. It'll be interesting to see when the team sheets are announced.
Yeah, because the more recent, we're going back to Joe is not speaking to the media so often these days. So the most recent press conference we had was on Saturday, where he said Ringrose wouldn't be quite fit to actually play against Scarlets, but he would be technically fit to make his comeback against Wales. And then he's throwing around that possibility, Keith, of do I throw in Gary Ringrose with zero game time behind him into a test match? And yeah, he was kind of made a face as if to say, it's not ideal, but I'm not ruling it out either. I guess you have to see how the guy goes in training.
I think so, and I also think that we have to be slightly circumspect with what Joe says in relation to team selection, because he's kind of played a few games with us over the years, which is fine. I suppose it's his prerogative. It's very irritating for us, but we have to get over it and get past that too. But I think he'd be slow to risk a guy if there was any doubt. So I think if Ringrose manages to play this weekend, it means that at least he's able to play, and if he is up to speed, we might be able to get him for part of the game. But if that was to happen, I would imagine they'd rather start with him than bring him on off the bench.
Yeah.
Because that's often the case when players are coming back from injury. But there are options there. I think Chris Farrell is the right option. I mean, I know that some people have been discussing whether they'd look at putting Keith Earls back into 13. He did a job against a team that were shattered, and yet they managed to score a few tries at the end. He did a job because he was supposed to, because there was injuries in the field, but that's not ideal, and he is our form player at the moment. You want him in the position where he can score tries.
Okay, well, we'll see how that plays out. Keith, it suddenly strikes me we haven't actually had you on across the entire Six Nations yet, so from events in Paris to a slightly flatter atmosphere at the Aviva in Dublin, what have you made of it all?
Yeah, do you know what? I looked at the first game, and it was funny. I went on a news blackout. I went away for about 10 days, and
Donald Trump is still the president.
He is disturbingly on every single level, and I just didn't read anything. I didn't look at anything, so I only looked at the game with my own voices in my head, as it were. And
are there many?
There are always a few, it has to be said. I have that small touch of madness just in case, but It looked like Joe had picked a team and a style of play in Paris to go and win, and it was a little bit conservative, and I think he needed certain things to happen. I think in his view he'd be incredibly annoyed with the fact that Nigel Owens decided not to ref for the last 15 minutes, and he had a really poor game, and the play that ended up in 41 phases wasn't intended. That was to be set for a penalty, to kick it over, to give that area of space that Ireland would have to win the game. And there was that level of attention to detail to it for Ireland to go and do it. A bit conservative, but it's very hard for a fan, and I've talked to a few fans in around the match itself and the days afterwards. It's actually very hard to explain how difficult it is to go and win in Paris, how intimidating it can be, and you can say whether you're professional or not professional, that doesn't matter. And I've even watched some of the Winter Olympics over the last few games, and people who are world champions and expected to win have fallen at times just for making an error. One error may be all it takes. I thought France played particularly well and have played well in the last two matches, albeit still lacking a bit of discipline. But I think the first match and the win was got and done, and I would have said that Joe would have been really happy with that and would have been about as ideal as it could. He didn't take one risk in that game, and partly because of that, I think there's an opportunity that Ireland could have gone and won more, and it made it far more comfortable in the last 10 minutes. But equally well, there's an opportunity where doing that and taking those chances may have opened up the possibility for France to counteract and score against you. And I know that's not the most exciting sounding survey of a game, but I think it's actually what happened, and I think he's delighted, because that was the big banana skin. Ireland have started poorly in the last couple of years. They have got the win this time.
Yeah, I think on Saturday, certainly, he said, if you had told me before the first match that we would have had 9 points and a 39 points differential, I would have bitten your hand off. And there was almost that sense of relief, because the Six Nations is so delicate and momentum is so delicate, Stephen. I think there is this sense, even listening to Tyke Furlong, who was in here yesterday, he was just saying, look, we're just kind of delighted that we're up and running and there's been no banana skin early doors, and actually you just don't want to rule yourself out of this type of tournament early doors.
I think that's bang on. I think the scenes at the end of the game in Paris where they all ran down the pitch and jumped on Johnny Sexton, yes, there were scenes of celebration, but I think it was also scenes of relief, because if you lost that first match, you knew you were going to be up against it. They were up against it last year, and it was just that, we got over the first hurdle, now we can kick on. And any fan that you talked to before the Six Nations was like, get France out of the way, you have 3 home games and you really set yourself up. So for me, it's just so exciting that we were able to get over that hurdle, and a little bit of Johnny Sexton magic got Ireland over the line.
Yeah. And what can you take from the Italian match? I mean, it's hard to draw.
I'm not sure. I'm really not sure that you can take that much out of it, because after 20 minutes, it just didn't seem like a test match. It just seemed flat. The fans were flat. The atmosphere in the stadium wasn't great. Yeah, beautiful day in Dublin. Just really exciting. And then you watch the England versus Wales match and the intensity of it. And I think, next weekend when Wales come to town, it's going to be a completely different story, because I don't think they've been tested in the intensity, the ball in play, 3-4 minutes at a time, the ball was in play, England versus Wales. And I just don't think Ireland have got to that stage, and mentally and physically I think they are up to it, but I don't think they've been challenged in the last 2 games in that intensity.
And Wales showed steel, in Twickenham. Keith, we might talk about specific teams in just a second, but away from Ireland, the championship as a whole, Keith, there haven't been the Scotland-France game was pretty exciting. There have been some turgid, tentative enough contests. What are you made of it on the whole as a spectacle?
Well, I think the Scotland France game was brilliant in excitement, but poor in standard and in errors. It was an error-strewn game. It was incredibly exciting, and I also thought France wanted to try and play that way. So did Scotland. That's the way they want to play. And Scotland then tightened up in the second half, and it was. it was a really good game for the neutral, because it was ebb and flow, and there was lots of different things that were happening with it. I enjoyed the game. I thought they were trying to take risks, and for both those teams, they've both lost a game. They needed to take risks. So in that respect, it was the right thing. Six Nations so far has been okay. I think the Scotland-Wales game at the start was interesting. Wales-England was a dour affair of rugby, and one that England didn't score after 20 minutes, so that doesn't augur that well for them. The injuries, I think, have upset an awful lot of the way the teams have played. Again, I was disappointed with some of the parts of England-Wales. That was a try. I mean, I actually think England would have still won the game, because that was only on 27 or 28 minutes. But it was a try. It was a silly officiating error. It's come out. The World Rugby have come out and said it was. It was the rationale behind it. I just don't know that they fully tidied up the conversations that you can have. And especially when you're having it with a French referee, some of the things that get lost in translation, or in the clarity of the English language, I get incredibly frustrated. Who uses sentence structures like the TMOs do? It's as if they've made up their own. It's just so bloody frustrating.
Anything in particular? I'm struggling to think what you mean.
No, they're just saying everything is kind of put back to front. It's been translated from another language, and the verbs are the end of the sentence instead of the middle of it. It's just irritating,
Right, okay. Alan Rowland, the head of World Rugby referees, rang Warren Gatland on Monday to say sorry about all that, which would have been an interesting phone call. Eddie Jones has said he thinks it was crazy for them to retrospectively even rule on the decision.
But Eddie Jones is saying that, having criticised after the game last week. I mean, he just makes it up as he's going along,
Yeah. Do you like Eddie Jones, Stephen, the way he's doing his business? Would you like to play for a guy who's kind of so out there in public?
I'm not so sure. It's a funny point you make about the referees. I sat beside Eddie Jones at the World Rugby Awards in London last year. And as soon as I sat down, I looked at the name card beside me and it said Eddie Jones, and I was like, oh, here we go. But he was a really nice guy, asked loads of questions about rugby. He was trying to more or less pick my brain about Ulster and about Ireland, and just seemed like a really sound, dead-on guy. But the kind of image he portrays to the media would seem completely the opposite to that, because anybody I speak to says, oh, Eddie Jones, what kind of character is he? Doesn't come across that well. But would I like to play for him? Of course I would. Yeah, I think he's probably one of the best coaches in the world. He's proven that with his record. But I go back to the referees. Like, Wales are coming to the Aviva Stadium in a week and a half. It wasn't that long ago where Wayne Barnes penalised me for a tip tackle at the end of the game, and a letter came back a week later after Lee Halfpenny slotted 3 points for them to win, and I think that was the opening game, and they went on to win a Grand Slam. And the letter came apologising that more or less a referee decision had cost us the game because I had been proven innocent that it wasn't a tip tackle. So referee decisions, it cannot get to the stage where they're deciding a championship. So I totally agree with Keith. That was a try. Would Wales have went on to win that match? I probably don't think they would have. However, at that time, they could have got a little bit of momentum, and hindsight's a wonderful, wonderful thing. But referee decisions, it needs to be looked at. Year in, year out, we keep talking about it, Joe. It keeps coming up on your show, keeps coming up on everything to do with rugby. And I just think it needs to be addressed and for it to be nailed down, because it's not good enough.
What I don't like is in the TMO that it's as if the referee, we would always say, if the referee makes the call, we have to respect the call. That's part of the game, so that's it. But when it becomes a discussion point with a TMO, how good is that guy? Is he an international referee to be making that call and that adjudication on that instance? It still needs to go back. I think it is. I don't think he got it there, ref, but it should be down to the ref's call. So Garza should have made that call himself. Well, I actually think it is a try. They're looking at a big screen just the same as everybody else.
Yeah, although I've even heard the point made, I don't know how true it is, because I haven't been in Twickenham anytime lately, that it's a giant screen quite a fair bit away, and actually the pixels, the definition isn't as superb as it could be if Garcés could run over to the side of the touchline and look at a better quality picture. We're talking, millimetres beyond millimetres here, and we're watching it on our HD TV. He's in Twickenham looking at a 60-foot screen. I don't know, again, the quality of the screen.
He should bring his iPhone. Bring his iPhone with him on exactly. He's got every other piece of kit. He's like a bloody cyborg running out there with more pieces of technology and cameras all the way out. Why not have something in his hand? He can see it for himself.
If I can get slightly technical for a moment here. So I was just reading Gordon Darcy talking about the Irish midfield and the creative juices available to Ireland. I noticed Shane Horgan, Stephen, he looks at Bundy Aki and he sees the power and the strength, and a guy who is good at an offload, even if that's not really something that the Irish team tend to do very often, but actually has question marks over his passing, particularly left to right pass. Not a fan of it. Thinks he quite often is we're not playing to his strengths in those pre-planned moves when it comes to Aki. There's a lot of contrasting opinions. Gordon Darcy today was very complimentary about, he said, Sexton, Aki and Conor Murray, they're building something unique. Talked about Aki as a first receiver. Talked about 2 seasons ago Ireland were overly reliant on Sexton. It became obvious defences would use their knowledge that almost every attack was going through him as first receiver. Ireland have adopted a more opportunistic approach with a more balanced use of the ball. Talked about Conor Murray's try down the left-hand side on Saturday as an example. And of Aki, he said his ability to stand up defenders, make the correct decision was really good. Took a few errors to find his range, but he was superb to watch. So I appreciate you don't have a tactics board here and the use of pictures, so we probably have to speak generally. But there is generally, Stephen, an air of... I find there's a debate ongoing about just how... creative, how useful Aki is in that Irish midfield, and that Irish midfield generally, how creative it is.
Well, I think when it comes to talking exactly about his passing, he does kind of fade off his pass. So when he throws the pass, he kind of sinks back into it and lets it go. A couple of times against the French, I think we got the Irish team got 3 points out of it when Jacob Stockdale made a break up the right hand side. But all he had to do was fix the defender, and he just kind of give it early. But I think in contrast to the game at the weekend, you could see he was taking it to the line more. Bundy Aki's strength is going forward with the ball in hand and sitting down defenders. Is his strength throwing 20, 30-yard passes? Do you need Bundy Aki playing 12 for Ireland to make those 20, 30-yard passes? I'm not so sure. Okay. If he's running at me in defence, I'd be, you'd have to be on your game to make sure that guy doesn't run over the top of you, because he is so good with ball in hand, and as you say, he is able to get that offload away. So I don't think it's a concern. I would probably disagree with Shane and agree with Gordon Darcy, because he was able to throw a left-handed pass at pace into the breadbasket for Keith Earls to score in the corner. So I'm not so sure. And again, the more he's playing there, the more he's working with Johnny Sexton inside him, the more that's going to come. So for me, Joe, it's not a concern at all. Okay,
and actually it was only the third time Sexton, Aki and Henshaw had played together for Ireland. Keith, the Irish midfield, I think part of it as well is, post the lines and Sexton and Farrell, and then what Ford and Farrell are doing for England, we're all very interested in the notion of a first receiver right now, and another playmaker in there. I don't know if you have strong opinions either way on where Ireland are going to go.
Yeah, I love that idea of having another playmaker. I think it's one of those ideal situations you can have if you have the right personnel to do it. If you look at George Ford playing in England at the moment, he's not playing particularly well, but he plays well when he puts on a white jersey. It suits him, it fits it in. Farrell bosses an awful lot of the game, so it takes a lot of the pressure off his shoulders. I do think it is revolving a tiny bit less around Johnny at the moment with Ireland, but I'd like it to be less again still, because I still feel he's the target. He's got a big bullseye on him, and an awful lot of the game goes through him. In relation to the Aki, I think he looks to pass later, and I think that sometimes puts his pass under a little bit of pressure, and because he is so explosive. I think that's understandable, and I still think he's very new and raw in international rugby. situations change in front of him an awful lot faster than he's used to. So he's growing into it. I'd like to see Robbie Henshaw. It's so sad that he's injured. I feel sometimes we use him too much as the bullocking guy, when I think he has an awful lot of the skills to use when that he's not using anywhere near as much. He's playing to suit the team as opposed to maybe his skill set. So I don't know. I think with Ringrose in there, I think we have more of a kind of elusive cutting edge. We don't really have a sort of outside centre that is hitting his wingers going over the line all the time. But I think we need to play a little bit more in our back line. It shouldn't be reliant on those wraparounds that Johnny does and that sort of long languid pass of his hands that he has. And that isn't a criticism on him at all, because actually, if I was to go back to what my favourite image of the Six Nations is, it's the smile on Johnny Sexton's face when the drop goal went over. It's a smile we see rarely. And yes, he does love the game. He's sometimes like a tortured soul, but he loves the game and he loves that kind of moment. And he looks like a man in control of his arena, which is great. So I do think we need to have a little bit more in the centres, but that's not the manner in which Ireland have played under Joe Schmidt. And if you look at England, you have wingers cropping up everywhere as one out, ball runners, off the scrum half. That doesn't happen with Ireland, but we're not mixing it up quite as much.
Although interestingly, Sergio Parise after the game on Saturday said, I think Ireland play much better rugby than England for me. Obviously he played England in Rome the week before. So Ireland much better rugby than England, much more difficult to defend against Ireland for me. For me personally, it was far more difficult against Ireland. I like the way they play. Very good rugby. Yeah, they are better than England, was the Sergio Parise view.
It's a lovely thing to say, only that I would only say in terms of Italy would like to have turned up on the second day. Their defensive line was non-existent, and after 10 minutes they looked like they were gone, which is a shame, because does that detract from Ireland's performance? I don't think it does. Ireland went out and did the job they were supposed to do, but Italy were so poor at the weekend, like really, really poor.
Yeah. We don't have too much time to get into Scotland, France. You mentioned the French discipline. I mean, that extended to the evening time, and it now seems a good chunk of their team will miss the Italian game next Friday. Teddy Thomas will be out, Lamrat will be out, Piccamos will be out, Anthony Bello, that young out half, will be out, and a few others besides. They're going to bring in Tranduc, Bastereau, Gail Ficau. The police had to speak to the team, but it seems nothing will come of it. But they seem to just have an unending ability to screw themselves up. So that's the French situation. There is club action this weekend. So Connacht play Zebre, Leinster play the Scarlets, which will be interesting, Ulster, Edinburgh and Cardiff, Munster. Stephen, I wanted, before we go, to just get your feel on how things are going at Ulster. So John O'Gibbs seems to be in as coach, although the Sydney Morning Herald are reporting that Michael Cheika is trying to lure him over to Australia just to destabilise Ulster further. Bryn Cunningham seems to be in there trying to steady the ship. Jared Payne seems to have a coaching role. Talk to us. What's going on,
Joe?
Kind of. I mean, it's a basket case.
It is. I was in Belfast today, and I was in a coffee shop, and lads were coming and going, and there was just a few hellos. There was no conversations really broke out. I'm not sure.
The lads as in players?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
right, yeah.
Players.
Oh, you're the enemy now. They can't talk to you.
Yeah, well, that's true, but it just kind of feels that obviously there's something not right at Ulster, and there hasn't been for the last couple of seasons, but with a couple of grey clouds hanging over Ulster for various reasons, we won't go into too much depth on that.
Sure.
It just seems like there's another grey cloud that's just popped up this week, and with John O'Gibbs taking over as head coach, and then that news coming out that he's linked up with moving back to Australia. And I think the worrying thing for me is that he hasn't publicly come out and said, I'm not going to take that job, and I'm committed to Ulster, and I'm going to stay here, and we're working hard towards this crucial match against Edinburgh on Friday night at the Kingspan Stadium. It's all just been very quiet. And if there wasn't any speculation in it, then I think he would have come out and said that he's 100% committed to Ulster. So I definitely think there's something in it. It would be a huge blow. Another blow. I know they're looking at their coaching structures of what they're going to get in place going forward. Nobody really has the answers. And in terms of Ulster on the pitch at the minute, yes, they had a great win against the Southern Kings outfit, but the Southern Kings rocked up. I watched them getting off the bus. They looked like a semi-professional team, the way they were just the way they kind of looked in terms of their kind of attitude, getting off the bus. They're laughing and joking, running out onto the pitch, and then I think that translates from off the pitch onto the pitch, because I just don't know how sustainable a team like that being in the Pro 14 is going forward. And when the only couple of points that they've got was against Ulster at home, a few months back. It says a lot. But to go back to Ulster versus Edinburgh, geez, Joe, if you had said to me at the start of the season that Ulster versus Edinburgh is probably one of the most important games of the year, I would have laughed at you, because Ulster are just so used to beating Edinburgh home and away year in, year out this last 3 or 4 seasons. And now a lot is riding on this game. Charles Piatai's out injured, Sean Reedy's out injured, Rob Little pulled up by a hamstring, he's out injured. So there's going to be a couple of veterans coming back in, the likes of Andrew Trimble and maybe Chris Henry into the back row. So yeah, it's a hugely important game, and one that they have to win, and one that they have to keep the fans on side, because at the minute there's so much negativity as all these grey clouds just keep coming back in.
I would think so. On a cheerier note to finish then, Tom has texted in wondering who the lads' player of the tournament is thus far in the Six Nations.
I was going to say Teddy Thomas, but he's the first one.
Sullied his bib somewhat, yeah.
I think Keith Earls has been brilliant.
Yeah.
I think Johnny Sexton has been fantastic. It's funny because when we look at I'm presuming we're talking maybe Irish players.
I think generally, I think Owen Farrell's getting mentions too.
Owen Farrell is pretty class. I think Joe Launchbury at the weekend. I mean, I love all these subtexts, and within subtexts, Joe Launchbury gets an opportunity to play against Wales, coached by Warren Gatland. Warren Gatland didn't bring him on the Lions tour. Joe Launchbury was phenomenal at the weekend. I mean, absolutely phenomenal. And yeah, I think there's a good few guys that are going in around it. Laidlaw being out injured, coming back in and then just taking control of a whole game, which is pretty impressive.
Anyone jumping out for you, Stephen, finally?
I think Conor Murray has been one of Ireland's standouts. He played 80 minutes in Paris. That pass that had to land on a sixpence for Johnny Sexton to knock over the 3 points, he was able to do that. I think he performed really well on the time that he was on the pitch against Italy. I would probably go Johnny Sexton over Owen Farrell just because of his goal kicking. Owen Farrell's missed a couple. Johnny Sexton has been pretty precise in getting the ball between the posts. So it's all Irish for me, Joe.
Yeah, shockingly. Okay. We'll leave it there. I guess this time next week it will be all attention and all eyes on Ireland, Wales and Dublin, which is going to be huge. Lads, thanks a million.
Brilliant. Cheers, gents.
Cheers.
Wednesday night rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
Off the Ball on News Talk.
In association with the Air Sport app, allowing you to cast your favourite sporting action from your tablet or mobile phone straight to your TV.
The Eason Book Club on the Pat Kenny Show.
This month, Eason recommended 4 books for our book club. On the Bright Side by Hendrik Groen, A Long Way From Home by Peter Carey, The Mermaid and Mrs. Hancock by Imogen Hermes Gower. And this February, the Eason Book Club Book of the Month is The Tattooist of Auschwitz by Heather Morris. On the first transport from Slovakia to Auschwitz in 1942, Lale immediately stands out to his fellow prisoners. In the camp, he's looked up to, looked out for, and put to work in the privileged position of tattooverer, the tattooist, to mark his fellow prisoners forever. Now, we'd love to have listeners join us in reading this book, so if you're in a book club or just reading it at home, let us know on patkenny@newstalk.com and make sure to get in touch